Okay, in this video we're going to talk about a few things from the main toolbar up here, and we're going to go ahead and get you familiar with what these different tools do and what they can be useful for. So let's start over here on the left. Over here we have a couple of arrow icons, and one is for undo and one is for redo. So it's pretty simple how they work. Like in most programs that have undo and redo functions, if I move something or I make a change and then I hit undo, the change is undone. Then I can hit redo to redo the change, or undo if I change my mind. So that's pretty simple. Over here we have the linking tools. Now these tools can be used to link things, also known as parenting in other software. So how does linking work, and what can it be useful for? Well, let's say for example I have this sphere over here, and I have this cube, and I want this sphere to move with the cube. So let me select this sphere, and I'm going to move it to the top here and place it on top of the cube, almost like if it was a table or something like that. If I grab the cube and I move it up or move it anywhere, it just goes right through the sphere. Well, that's no good. I want the sphere to stay on top of the cube at all times, just like it probably would in real life. Well, actually in real life it would probably just roll off the side, but I think you get the idea. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to link this sphere to the cube, so that when the cube moves around, the sphere moves with it. But if the sphere moves, the cube will stay still, because obviously the sphere, we don't want it set up to control the cube. So how can we do that? Well, it's pretty simple. Let's select the sphere. Let's go over here to this icon that says select and link. So grab that icon, and what we're going to do is we're going to select the sphere over here, drag with the left mouse button, and let go on top of the object you want to link to. So let go right on top of the cube. Now right click to edit that out of the video, starting again in 3, 2, 1. Now what happens is if we select the cube and we use the move tool to move it, the sphere is going to stay on top of the cube. It's linked to the cube. Now if we select and we move the sphere, the cube's going to stay in place. So that's a pretty neat little tool there, the linking and the linking tool. Now let's say we want to unlink these things. Well, it's pretty simple. Over here's an unlink button, so we can just click on that and it looks like nothing happened. But whatever object we had selected was unlinked. Since we had the sphere selected, the sphere became unlinked from whatever it was linked to, in this case the cube. So now the cube and the sphere are independent from each other, and neither one can control the other. Okay? Over here we have selection filters. By default it's set to all. What that means is that any object I select is selectable. But let's say for example I have a dense scene with a bunch of stuff like cubes and spheres and funny looking doors in the middle of nowhere. Like in my case, I can select different filters. Let's say I only want to select objects like geometry, for example. If I select geometry, I can select the sphere, I can select the cube, I can even select the doors. But I have two lights in the background over here, as you can see, indicated by these little yellow icons. If I try to select those lights, I can't select them. That's because they're considered to be lights and not geometric objects inside of 3ds Max. So if I go ahead and select lights as the filter, now I can only select lights. So see, now I can select these lights easily. But I can no longer select geometric objects such as the sphere, the cube, or the door. And the filters work for a number of different objects. They can work for cameras, for shapes, for warps and helpers, and even bones, if you're rigging a character or rigging something that has bones. So I'm going to click on all because I want to be able to select everything. Next to the select object tool, we have the select by name tool. So if we click on that, a little dialog box opens up. This box has a list of everything in my scene. So you can see here's the box 01, here's the bifolding door, here's the two omni lights, and here's the sphere that's sitting on top of the cube or the box. The color will be shown here. The type of object will be shown here. So these are geometry objects, these are light objects. If I had a rig with bones, they would show up as bone objects. I even get a count here of the number of faces that each of these geometric objects has. So I know that the bifold door is made up of 208 faces. The sphere is made up of 916, so on and so forth. And I can use this to find and select things. So if I want to find a specific object, like say box, I can go ahead and start typing box. And 3ds Max's little selection window will go ahead and select box 01. Now, what happens if I have, say, another box? Let me just duplicate this real quick. So I have two boxes, and the way to do that is pretty simple. Just hit Control and V on the keyboard to go ahead and make a duplicate of that box. Now, this box here is called box 02. This box is called box 01. How do I know that? Well, if I go over here to the command panel, I can see the name of the object. Also, if you hover your mouse over an object long enough, edit that out of the video, edit that out of the video. Starting again, 3, 2, 1. Also, if we hover our mouse over an object that's not selected long enough, a tooltip pops up giving us the name of the object. So I know that this object's called box 01. This one over here is box 02. Now let me open up that selection dialog again. And now you see we have a box 01 and box 02. If I go to the find input box over here and I start to type in the word box, I type in B, everything that starts with the letter B is selected. So I start to narrow it down by typing in O. Now everything called box is selected. If I type in an X, it's still selected. If I type in 0, it's still selected. As soon as I type in 1, 3D Max goes ahead and narrows it down to box 01. Same thing if I type in 2. So this selection box is extremely useful for quickly selecting objects, especially if you have a very dense scene that you're working with. So let's cancel that. The shortcut key for the selection box or the selection menu is to hit H on the keyboard, and that opens up the select from scene dialog box window quickly. Okay. Now we talked about a few of these. Let's talk about a few of these other things over here. Let's talk about select and manipulate. Edit that part out of the video. Edit that part out of the video. Starting again in 3, 2, 1. Over here to the right we have our snapping options. These are different tools used for snapping different things, and they're used in different situations. So let me go ahead and show you how some of these work and run you through the basics. Right here you have this sort of a magnet icon with the number 3. If we left click and hold the left mouse button, we can see we have 3 options. We have 2D snapping, 2.5D snapping, and 3D snapping. Let's use 3D snapping. What this allows us to do is to snap something to something else. So, what do you mean? Well, it's pretty simple. Let's say I select this sphere and I want to snap the sphere on top of, say, maybe one of these corners of this cube over here. Well, it's pretty simple. Simply click and drag from the sphere and then just go ahead and hover your mouse over that vertex that's right there. Now the sphere is going to be snapped to that point. I'll hit Control Z to undo. The shortcut to activate snapping is with the S key. So hit the S key to activate snapping and hit it again to deactivate snapping. So it's pretty simple to use. If you want to activate the options for snapping, right click on top of the snaps toggle button and the grid and snap settings window will pop up. Here you can tell 3D Max that you want to snap only to grid points. Maybe you want to snap to vertices. Maybe you want to snap to edges or segments or faces, or all kinds of different things, including bounding boxes, grid lines, all kinds of different things. Okay, you can change all kinds of different options here and so on and so forth. So let me close that window down. Let me show you the next one is the angle snap. Now the angle snap works with rotation. So let's take this sphere, let's move it up here, and I'm going to hit Z on the keyboard to zoom in on it or to frame in on this this one little sphere. Okay, I'm going to hit J on the keyboard to get rid of these selection brackets. J toggles them on and off. I personally don't like them, so I like to turn them off. Okay, let's activate the rotate tool by hitting E on the keyboard. So now you can see, edit that part out of the video, the phone was ringing. Okay, so start again in three. Hang on. Three, two. God damn it! Fucking water gives me gas. Three, two, one. So we'll hit E on the keyboard to activate the rotate tool. Now here's the rotate tool. Now if I go ahead and rotate this right here in the Z axis, it'll just rotate freely. Now if I want to angle snap that, I can. So let's turn on the angle snap toggle, and now we can angle snap this. So you notice that when you rotate, it'll go ahead and snap. Right now it's set at the default, which is 5 degrees, but I can change that. Right click on top of the angle snap button, and over here you can change the actual the snapping value. So over here where it says angle, change it from 5 degrees to anything you need. So say if in my case I needed 15-degree increments, I can go ahead and put 15 degrees, close that, and now when I do angle snapping, it'll snap every 15 degrees. So I can go 15 degrees, 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 60 degrees, so on and so forth. I can also use the coordinate display down here to type that in manually. So I can put in 0 degrees down here, or I can put in 15 degrees or 45 degrees, or whatever I want. Okay, then we have over here the percent snap toggle. The percent snap toggle. Now the percent snap toggle works with scaling. So let's activate the scale tool and see how that works. Hit R on the keyboard to activate the scale tool. Okay, and now let's go ahead and activate that. Let's deactivate angle snap. We don't need it anymore. We'll make sure that percent snap toggle is turned on. So what does percent snap toggle do? Well, if I go ahead and start to scale this up, you notice that it snaps, and it's snapping by 10. What that means is that it's going to increase by 10% every time that I scale up. So if we look down here at the coordinate display, keep your eye on the numbers. Right now it's at 100%. If I go ahead and increase the size of this, it goes up to 110%, 120, 130. So it keeps going up 10 and 10 and 10. To change that, you can right click on the actual button itself, and you can change that percentage down here where it says percent. Go ahead and change that. See, the default is 10. You can change that to say 50% if you wanted to. And now when you scale up, it'll jump up by 50%. So now it's jumping up more and more and more. So it just gives you a little bit more control when you're scaling. And again, you can come down here to the coordinate display and type in whatever you need to. So you can increase this to 125% or go back to 100%, which is the regular scale. Okay. Then we have over here the spinner snap toggle. What can we use this spinner snap toggle for? Well, this is used for any spinner in 3D Max. If we go down here to say the frame rate here, or the frame locator. No, check that. Say that correctly. Edit that out of the video. Starting again in 3, 2, 1. If we go down here to this input box where we can input the frame we want, we'll notice that there's a spinner on the right. A lot of menu items in 3ds Max have spinners. You can use these spinners to go ahead and change values of different parameters and properties in 3ds Max. So the spinner snap toggle, what that allows you to do is to toggle the amount of value to a spinner. So let me show you how that works with a practical example. I'll hit W on the keyboard to activate the move tool here. What I'll do is let me change this. Let me round this off to a nice number. Right now this sphere is located at 63.382 in Z-axis. Let me just put that as 63. Okay, so now it's 63.0. If I move this spinner now, if I click on it, every time I click on it, it just jumps up a whole bunch of numbers. See that? So it's not very even, it's not very clean, it's just jumping up all these crazy numbers. Let me go back to 63. If I turn on the spinner snap, what's going to happen is every time I hit the spinner, it's going to go up by an increment of 1.0. So it went up from 63 to 64. If I click it again, it goes up to 65. So I have much cleaner numbers to work with. If I right click, I can open up the options for the spinner. And if I want to change that, I go down here to this preference settings, I go to spinners, and I change the use snap is already activated, but I can change the snap to say 10. So let's put 10. Let's hit OK. And now what happens is every time I hit the spinner, it's going to go up by 10. So it goes from 63 to 73 to 83, so on and so forth. And that'll work for all the spinners in 3ds Max. So that's pretty much what the spinner snap toggle is useful for. Now let's look at creating selection sets. Selection sets can be very useful in 3ds Max because they can be very useful for selecting objects. Let me show you how they work. Right now, by default, it just says create selection set. If I click here, that text goes away and now it's blank and empty. If I click on the drop down box, you'll notice that it's completely empty. That's because we haven't created a selection set yet. Well, let's go ahead and create one real quick. Let's say I want to create a selection set for the cubes. So every time I select a selection set, both cubes become selected. So what I'll do is I'll select both cubes. So now they're both selected. I'll go up here to selection sets and I'll type something in, like say cube selection. And you can call this whatever you want. Hit enter and it looks like nothing happened, but something did. Click an empty space to deselect everything. Now click on the drop down box up here for the selection sets and you'll notice that cube selection is there. That's because we just created it. If I click on cube selection, it'll become the active selection set. And you notice that both of these cubes are selected. And over here, it'll say 2 objects selected, as well as down here in the command feedback. So there we go. We have 2 cubes selected. So selection sets can be extremely useful specifically for creating different selection sets of different objects. So if you have a very complex scene, and say you have a scene of a whole bunch of buildings and there's stop signs and street lights everywhere, well, you can make a whole selection set of all the stop signs in your scene, so you can quickly select them all if you need to, instead of going block by block selecting all of the stop signs one by one. If you click on this button here, it opens up a little name selection sets window. And this is where you have a lot more control over your selection sets. Right here, you'll see a list of all the selection sets in the scene. Right now we only have one called cube selection. If we click on the plus icon, we can expand it and we can see all the objects that belong to that cube selection. In this case, box 01 and box 02. We can also create new selection sets. So if we go over here to create new set, we can click on that and create a new selection set. We can rename it to say doors and stuff. Okay, so now we have a new selection set. If I go ahead and I expand it, you'll notice that the box 01 and box 02 are in that selection set. The reason for that is when I created the selection set, I had both boxes selected. So that's no good. What I can do is simply select these objects and I can remove them. So select this object here, this box object, and click on remove up there with that black X. Select this object, hit remove, and it removes the boxes from that selection set. So now doors and stuff is completely empty. Well, what I can do now is select the sphere, hold down control and select the doors. I can right click on top of the doors and stuff selection set, and then I can click on add selected objects. When I do that, now the bifold door and the sphere get added to that selection set. So you can see how selection sets can be pretty useful when working on complex scenes. Okay, so that's going to do it for this video. I'm going to end it here, and I'll see you in the next one where we'll continue to dissect 3D Studio Max and keep working with it.